Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. Today's video, we're talking horror movies. Specifically, all the horror movies I've watched in the past 2 months. So let's get into it. So we're going back to June when I watched Videodrome for the first time. So this is a David Cronenberg classic that I believe is a lot of people's favorites. A lot of people have recommended this one to me, and I stayed away from it for a long time because I was really nervous it was going to be super disturbing. And it was disturbing, but it wasn't as disturbing as I imagined it would be. As the president of a trashy TV channel, Max Wren is desperate for new programming to attract viewers. When he happens upon Videodrome, a TV show dedicated to gratuitous torture and punishment, Max sees a potential hit and broadcasts the show on his channel. However, after his girlfriend auditions for the show and never returns, Max investigates the truth behind Videodrome and discovers that the graphic violence may not be as fake as he thought. So this one stars James Woods and also Debbie Harry from Blondie, which was interesting. And it's really weird. There's a ton of body horror and unsettling moments where we're watching this character kind of lose control. And there's also an interesting element of violence in the media and how it can seep into your veins and take over you basically and cause you to do certain things. It just made me feel weird watching it because it's obviously a commentary on entertainment and the media and how much we consume. It made me think, like, why am I watching this right now? I know it's bad for me, but I can't get enough of it. Then I watched the 2022 horror thriller Watcher, starring Micah Monroe as a young woman who moves abroad with her husband and begins being stalked by a mysterious neighbor. And the worst of it is, no one believes her. This one is a slow burn, but I think it's worth the payoff. Micah Monroe is mesmerizing to watch. I love her in pretty much everything, and she really excels here. Tensions are high. There's a very dreadful feeling throughout this movie as you slowly follow Micah Monroe's character go through this horrifying situation. She's gaslit by people around her. She really has to fight for herself and advocate for herself. There's a lot of moments where you just feel her just be demoralized, and it's just a scary situation all around. And I like that the movie centers on a concept that is so real. Women are put into situations like this all the time where they're being stalked by an abusive ex or a person in their lives, or maybe even a stranger, and there's nothing that's really done to help this woman. And likely women aren't believed in certain situations until they're dead. Women end up getting killed, and that's what this whole story focuses on. And it was just really scary to watch as a woman because we're so vulnerable at all times, and it's just scary. It's scary being a woman, and this movie perfectly highlights that. I really love this one. I think it's going to be in my top 2022 horror movies, and I really think you should watch it. It gave me Rosemary's Baby vibes in the sense of they are living in this apartment building. She's very isolated and alone, and she feels like everyone else is against her. It's got those same vibes as Rosemary's Baby, and it's got a classic horror feel, and I loved it. Then I watched this movie called Landmine Goes Click. So this came up on TikTok. Somebody described it as one of the most disturbing movies they've ever watched, and I was like, okay, I'm intrigued. So it's about this group of American tourists. They're traveling somewhere in the mountains. They're backpacking, and I can't remember the name of the place, but one of them steps on a landmine, and they're put in a horrific situation because they're hundreds of miles away from civilization. Their cell phones don't work. While they're in this situation, they're really taken advantage of by a mysterious stranger who shows up and begins messing with them. Concept-wise, I thought it was a great concept. I was like, okay, we see these people put into this horrifying situation that just gets more horrifying. I'm into it. However, this movie was so bad. It was not good at all. It was a painful watch. You get through the landmines stuff like within the first like 5 to 10 minutes, and then it gets boring. I was like, okay, I get it. Now what are they gonna do? The acting was horrendous, especially the lead male. I think he was from a Disney show or something. He was just so unbelievable, and his acting was so forced. I just didn't believe anything that was coming out of him, and he was just driving me insane. But I did like the female actress who, she's been in other stuff. She's been in like the Resident Evil movies and Detention. Her name is Spencer Locke. I think she was also in the Insidious movies. She is normally good. I just feel like everything, the direction of this movie, the sound was awful. You couldn't hear their dialogue sometimes because the music was so loud. The editing was just horrendous. It was horrible. And I feel like it was just a train wreck. I don't know. And then there's a very prolonged, unnecessarily long essay scene that it just goes on for so long, and you're just like, what the fuck? This character gets so battered and there's no redeemingness. She doesn't get to redeem herself. Like, I'm sorry, this is a spoiler, but I'm not recommending this movie. It's just ridiculous. And there's no redeeming qualities of this movie, and I don't understand people who enjoy it. But if you want to watch it, if you're bored and you're interested in seeing how it goes, it's on Tubi, or it was on Tubi when I watched it. It's just, yeah, horrible. All right, now we're moving into July, which I watched a lot more movies than June. In July, kicked off the month strong and watched a classic horror movie, the perfect 4th of July horror movie that you need to watch every 4th of July, in my opinion, and that is Jaws. Steven Spielberg classic about a small island town that is being terrorized by a great white shark. I love this movie so much. I feel like it never gets old, no matter how many times I watch it. I feel like every time I watch it, I find something new that I like about it, and I love the characters. Chief Brody, I love how he starts as this character who's kind of just timid and he's terrified of the water, but then he goes through this transformation where he's forced into this horrific situation and he comes out a hero. I love the dynamic between Chief Brody and the other characters. Hooper is just a delight. I love him. Then we have Robert Shaw, who's playing Quint, who is just like a larger than life character, and he really brings this character to life. Robert Shaw plays him perfectly, where you're kind of terrified of him, but you also are hypnotized by him and you can't help but love him. He's just somebody you would love to hang out and have drinks with and share stories, because you know he's got a million of them, including the horrifying USS Indianapolis scene. That scene where he explains what happened, that whole monologue, is one of the most mesmerizing scenes in film, I think. It's just perfectly done. There's so much dread and suspense in that moment, and you're not even seeing anything. You're just listening to his story and how he survived that, and just seeing the other characters and how they're listening intently. It's just a perfect, masterful scene, and I love it so much. I love Jaws with all my heart. It's one of my top favorite horror movies of all time, and of course I had to watch it on July 4th. It's centered around July 4th. So then I watched this movie called Makeup. So it's about this young woman who moves in with her boyfriend who's living at this like holiday park. She begins to suspect that he's cheating on her, and then she kind of unravels over the course of the film. So the reason I watched this movie is because it stars Joseph Quinn from Stranger Things. I watched Stranger Things last in May and July and fell in love with Eddie Munson like the rest of the world. So I wanted to watch some more stuff that he was in because I think he's a fantastic actor. So he's not really the focus of this movie, it's really the female character, and it was an interesting coming of age drama that's kind of filmed like horror thriller. It's about this girl basically finding herself and discovering her sexuality and who she really is. Then I watched a documentary called Girl in the Picture, which is on Netflix. This is one of the most horrific stories I've ever heard of, about this young woman who's found dead after she was hit by a car. And when they look into this woman's life, they find out that this woman, she had a son, she was married to this older man, and the son gets kidnapped by this guy, and then they start looking into this guy's past, and they realize that this woman was previously known as somebody else, and this man was previously known as her father. And then when they start digging into her history, they uncover so many just unbelievable secrets, and you learn how truly failed this girl was by everyone in her life, and she just lived a horrible, horrible, sad life, and it's one of the saddest true crime cases I've ever heard of. And when you're watching the documentary, you're like, this can't get worse, but it does. It gets worse. It keeps getting worse. But what I like about it is that it really focuses on the victim, so you really get to learn who this woman is and how beautiful and kind and just loving and compassionate, and how much of a light she was to everybody in her life despite her horrific situations. I highly recommend this one. It's on Netflix, but do not go into it lightly because it's very depressing and very sad. Then I was traveling to Las Vegas for a work trip, and I watched Umma on the flight. I was so excited because I really wanted to watch this movie. So this is a horror movie starring Sandra Oh as a mother who's living kind of an idyllic life in a farm with her young daughter. Her life slowly begins to unravel when the remains of her estranged mother arrive at her house, and she begins seeing things, and it brings up horrific memories from her past, and she begins to fear that she's turning into her mother. And her mother was a super abusive woman. So this is about generational trauma, abuse, and overcoming that trauma and working through it so you don't repeat the cycle. I thought it was an interesting story, but I don't think it was as horror focused as I would have liked. There are some great scares, but I really think it's more of a family drama than anything, and I do think it was an interesting story with a great cast. Then I finally watched The Black Phone. This was one of my most anticipated horror movies of the year. This is based on the short story from Joe Hill, and it centers around a young boy who's kidnapped by a guy who's kidnapping boys in town, and he's put in his basement, and he basically has to figure out how to survive. And he finds unlikely help from a group of kids who were victims to this guy in the past. So this one has a lot of supernatural elements to it. There is an incredible cast of child actors in this. The two main leads in this are so good. I love the little girl. She's a standout. She makes this film so good. She's so just funny, and she's got great comedic timing, and I love watching her relationship with her brother. The sibling relationship in this just makes my heart so warm. I love sibling relationships, good sibling relationships, and it was just so sweet to watch them together, watch how supportive they were of each other. And there's elements that very much remind me of Stephen King characters. So you can obviously tell Joe Hill is Stephen King's son, and he is very much inspired by his dad. And this feels like a Stephen King story to me. I do think it was a little slow burn. There's not as many terrifying moments, but there are scary moments. Like, there's some good jump scares in here, and it has an incredible final act, in my opinion. And I thought it was an interesting story. It wasn't as scary as I was imagining, but overall, the story of a man kidnapping kids is absolutely terrifying in itself. I just wish that we would have gotten a little bit more backstory of this killer, this Ethan Hawke character, because when Ethan Hawke is on the screen, he is absolutely terrifying. But overall, I really liked the story. I thought it was good. Then I went to an early screening of Nope. So Nope is about two siblings who inherit a horse ranch from their dad, and they discover that there might be a UFO circling around their area, and they decide they want to catch it on film. I loved this. It was just such a blast. It is true summer blockbuster. It is just so over the top. It's high concept, and it just is completely entertaining and thrilling, and it's so layered. Like, I feel like you can go into this and watch it as it is, as an alien film, and then when you start to peel back those layers, Jordan Peele, peel back those layers, you discover all the different symbolism that Jordan Peele layers through the film, and you're just like, wow, this is a lot deeper than I thought. I loved it so much. It has one of the most horrifying scenes that I've ever watched. It gave me Fire in the Sky vibes, and I don't want to say much more than that, but it just terrified me. It was so claustrophobic. There's also stuff with a monkey that is very much inspired by a real life event, and it's horrific. It is so terrifying, and it's also sad. Like, it's just, there's so much going on with this movie. Cast is so good. Keke Palmer is just the standout, and I love watching her dynamic with Daniel Kaluuya's character. They play brother and sister, and you can just tell there's like so much history between them. They really do feel like brother and sister, but they don't have to like hit you over the face with it. You just know, and they're just total opposites, but they complement each other so well. It gave me Jaws vibes mixed with Tremors, and I think it's probably my favorite Jordan Peele movie aside from Us. Then I went to an early screening of Bodies. This is the new A24 horror slasher comedy about a group of rich kids who are having a hurricane party, and they decide to play a game of bodies, and things go horribly wrong, and people start dying. I loved this one. I thought it was so funny. I love that it's very much like a whodunit with a modern twist. I love that the characters just feel so real. I feel like it accurately depicts Gen Z and people who are social media obsessed, people that are super selfish and self-absorbed, and people who virtue signal and pretend to be bigger than themselves and pretend to care about issues, but when it comes down to it, they really don't give a shit. I just love that these characters are all so horrible but entertaining. You can't help but watch them. And Rachel Sennett is in this as a character who has a podcast, and she's just like super spoiled and self-absorbed, but she's so funny. Every word that comes out of her mouth, she delivers every line perfectly, and there's just some great laughs in this. I just feel like it goes to unexpected places. I love that it highlights toxic friendships. These characters felt real. And obviously a little over the top. It's a satire. It's supposed to be ridiculous. And I love that they play into the ridiculousness. I think it's a fun horror slasher. I think that it might be on my top movies of 2022. And then I watched the Reef, Stalked. So this is I guess a sequel to the shark film The Reef, but it has nothing to do with it. So this is about a group of women who are kayaking in the ocean, and they realize they're being stalked by a great white shark. Love the concept. I love shark movies. This one started off strong for me, and then I just got kind of bored. It was okay. It's currently on Shudder. There's a lot of dramatic backstory in the beginning of the film that they try to tie into the story, but I feel like they didn't do it in a way that works. It just kind of felt forced. This one just didn't do anything new. It didn't excite me that much. It was just okay. Good, not great. And I also recently checked out Pretty Little Liars Original Sin. You guys, this was made for us. This is a horror movie fan's dream. So I was a fan of the original Pretty Little Liars show back in the day. This one, I was kind of hesitant to watch it because of how badly the original series went. And they've done a few spin-offs that just did not interest me at all. But I went into it. It's on HBO Max. So right there, that tells you, okay, it's going to be a little bit more adult. And it is. So it centers on a group of young girls who are haunted by their past, and they begin receiving mysterious text messages from an unknown person who's trying to basically ruin their lives. And they quickly realize that what's happening to them is connected to a series of tragic events that happened 20 years ago. This storyline feels very much like an 80s slasher film, like Prom Night, Terror Train. It just feels like that old school horror revenge story, and I am loving it. There are so many nods to horror movies, especially in the first episode. The first episode, we have a nod to It, we have nods to Halloween, and specific scenes that are like literally Halloween from the movie Halloween. We also have a character who's very much like Randy Meeks from Scream. She is the horror aficionado, she's the movie buff, and she works at a movie theater, and she's always making horror movie references, which I can understand can get a little annoying to some, but I love it. I can't get enough of it. I don't care how many movie references you give me. It just excites me to hear them coming from young people on TV, because I'm just envisioning that these kids are going to look into all of these horror movies. They're going to start watching them. They're going to seek them out, and that's exciting to me. The cast of this is so good. I immediately connected with them. They are so likable. They feel like real girls that have their own interests and hobbies and specific personalities, and they weren't already best friends. Like, they come together as friends, so it just feels more realistic and believable. And also another thing I love is there is a relationship with an older male and one of the girls, and they play it like it should be, as in it's creepy. Like in the original series, there was a character who was having a relationship with their teacher that was so inappropriate, but it was played as like it was normal and like it was something you would want to strive for. I also love that there's not a huge focus on romance, because in the original series, that was a huge focus of the show, and they ended up just forcing storylines so that they could force specific ships that fans had for certain casts. This doesn't feel like that. It feels entirely like the focus is on the girls, the past set of traumas or tragic events, and how they're getting through this situation. And it's pretty dark. I love it so much. Highly recommend it, guys. I could not recommend it enough. It does come off as a little over the top and just ridiculous at times, but I love it. I am so into this series. There's 3 episodes up on HBO Max right now. Highly recommend you check it out. I think you'll really like it. You don't need to know anything about the original series because it has nothing to do with it. This is its own thing, which I think it was the way to go. That's everything I've watched recently. Let me know what you've watched, what you plan on watching, and what you're looking forward to as we end the summer, guys. We're almost in fall. It's almost spooky season. We have a lot more horror movies to come, and I'm so excited about it. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you next time. Bye.